over the city like tears, soft and relentless, blurring streetlights and washing the blood from the cracked pavement. Gunfire echoed in the distance, distant yet close enough to make the night feel alive with danger. On the edge of the bridge, a man with golden eyes stood alone, his coat soaked through, collar clinging to his neck, trembling from more than the cold. The Alpha Dragon Mafia King, feared across the city, untouchable, ruthless, was bleeding, cornered by enemies who had come for his life. Every step he took was measured, careful, yet he knew he couldn't hold them off forever. His hand brushed against the wet railing, slick with rain, and for a moment, time slowed. He thought of the empire he had built, the power he commanded, the fear he inspired. None of it mattered now. None of it would save him. A sudden shove, a flash of movement too quick to see, and he slipped. His hands scrabbled against the cold metal, claws barely grazing the surface, but gravity won. He fell. The river opened beneath him, dark and merciless, swallowing him whole. The water closed over him like a shroud, icy and suffocating, stealing his breath, washing away the city's lights. Hours later, she found him. A gentle nurse, her coat clinging to her skin, hair plastered to her forehead, kneeling by the shore. She saw the slight rise and fall of his chest beneath the soaked fabric. Her hands trembled as she pressed against his wounds, checking for life. Every second stretched long, heavy with fear. She whispered softly, more to herself than to him, "Stay with me." The water dripped from his hair into his closed eyes, mixing with blood, but still he moved. His chest rose faintly. She pressed harder, her heart hammering against her ribs. Hands shaking, she murmured the words again, urgent now, full of pleading. "Stay with me. Stay." His eyes flickered open, golden slivers cutting through the dim, rain-soaked night, and for a fleeting heartbeat, it seemed he recognized something. Her face, her voice, a warmth he had forgotten. And then, as if the night itself demanded it, his eyelids slipped closed again. Darkness reclaimed him. She stayed there, kneeling on the wet stones, fingers resting on the fragile barrier between life and death. She didn't know who he was, not the monster whispered about in the city, not the man who ruled with fire and teeth. She didn't know the empire he commanded, the enemies who would kill without hesitation, or the power coiled beneath his skin like a storm waiting to break. All she knew was the man lying broken before her, fragile in a way that made her heart ache. And so she held him, rain dripping into her hair, the sound of the city muffled by the storm and the river's soft rush. She whispered again, almost inaudible over the rain, "Please, stay." The river glimmered faintly as if listening. The city pulsed quietly in the distance. And for a moment, the Alpha Dragon Mafia King, the most dangerous man alive, was nothing more than a man in pain, alone and at the mercy of a kind stranger. And she did not know the truth. Not yet. He woke to a pale room, white walls glaring softly under the hospital lights. The steady beep of machines was the only sound keeping him tethered to reality. His head throbbed, each pulse a reminder that something had been lost, though he could not remember what. The pain was confusing, disorienting, but more than that, he felt empty. His name, his life, his past, all gone, leaving only a hollow space where memory once lived. And yet, amid the sterile scent and faint antiseptic, there was something else, something warm. She was there, kneeling beside him, hands clasped gently in her lap, watching him with quiet, gentle eyes that didn't look at him as a monster, but as someone fragile and in need. "You're awake," she said softly, almost afraid to break the silence. Her voice was a thread pulling him back from the edge of nothingness. He tried to speak, but words refused him. His lips trembled as he opened his mouth again, and finally a whisper escaped. "Who am I?" Her heart tightened. She wanted to tell him he was safe, that he was alive, that the world had not yet broken him completely. But the truth was a weight too heavy for a man who could not even remember himself. You're safe now," she murmured, voice trembling. "That's all that matters." He blinked, staring at her, golden eyes catching the fluorescent light. Something in him stirred, something ancient and restless, like a storm beneath a calm surface. Flashes of fire, faces kneeling, men screaming. He recoiled, a shiver running through him, but the images dissolved before they could fully take form. He didn't understand them, didn't know why they existed, yet they felt real, heavy with danger. Her hand moved instinctively, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost a lullaby, but firm enough to anchor him to the present. He held her hand as though clinging to a lifeline, letting the warmth ground him. Hours passed in gentle conversation, soft questions, and careful encouragement. She read to him, spoke to him about the world outside, told him about the rain, the bridge, the city that never truly slept. He listened, absorbing the smallest details as though learning life itself anew. Yet at night, the nightmares came. Flashes of fire, shadows moving too fast, men kneeling in silent terror. He woke with sweat coating his skin, hands trembling, heart pounding. But every time he reached out, her hand found his, holding him firmly in the world of warmth, not the one of shadows. I feel like I've hurt so many," he murmured one evening, voice breaking, eyes glimmering with tears he could not name. "You're safe now," she replied softly, pressing her hand over his. "Here, with me, none of that matters. You're alive." And for the first time since the fall, he allowed himself to believe it. That maybe, for this one fleeting moment, the man who had been a monster, or might still be, could be something simpler. Human. Vulnerable. Loved. But beyond the hospital walls, the city still whispered of a king lost, of enemies searching, of a power that had fallen into the wrong hands. And he did not yet know what shadow waited for him once his memory returned. The days became softer, quieter. The storm that had brought him into her life felt distant now, replaced by small, fragile routines. Morning light would slip through the hospital blinds, touching his face gently, and she would already be there, seated beside him as though she had never left. He began to smile, not wide, not careless, but careful smiles, the kind that felt borrowed, like he wasn't sure he deserved them. She would tell him about ordinary things, the old man in room 12 who complained about his soup, the stray cat that lingered near the hospital entrance, the way the rain hadn't stopped since the night she found him. He listened like it all mattered, like she mattered. Sometimes she would catch him staring at her when she thought he was asleep. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked once, her voice almost playful. He hesitated, searching for words that felt too big for his empty memory. Because, he said quietly, when I look at you, it feels like I'm not lost. Her breath caught. There was something in his eyes, something ancient and heavy, but softened by something new, something fragile. That night, he asked the question that had been haunting him. If I was someone terrible, his voice trembled slightly, would you still sit here with me? She swallowed the ache rising in her throat. Yes, she whispered, and she meant it. Outside the hospital walls, men whispered his name in dark rooms thick with smoke. Rival mafia factions searched for their missing king. Territories were shifting. Loyalty was breaking. The underworld was unraveling without its Alpha Dragon Lord. But inside this small, quiet room, none of that existed. Here, he was just a man, learning how to hold a cup without shaking. A man discovering how sunlight felt on his skin. A man who looked at her like she was the only truth he had left. One evening, when the sky turned bruised purple beyond the window, he reached for her hand first. His touch was warm, careful, as if afraid she might disappear. Do you think, he asked softly, that a person can start over, even if they don't deserve it? She intertwined her fingers with his. I think, she said, her voice barely above a breath, that everyone deserves a chance to choose who they want to be. He closed his eyes at that, because somewhere deep inside him, beneath the broken memories and buried fire, something stirred. Not power, not violence, but fear. Fear that whatever he had been would come back and take this away. That night, as she prepared to leave after her shift, she felt it, the faintest shift in the air. A presence outside the hospital gates. A black car parked too long beneath a flickering streetlight. Watching. Waiting. Upstairs, he stirred in his sleep. His fingers curled as though gripping something unseen. And for a split second, faint golden light flickered beneath his skin. Love was growing in that quiet hospital room, but so was the shadow. And shadows always return for what belongs to them. The quiet of the hospital shattered first with a sound she couldn't place, a silence that felt too heavy, too sharp, like the calm before a storm. She sensed it before she saw it, the shift in the air that told her danger was close. He awoke suddenly, chest tight, memories clawing their way to the surface. Flashes of fire, blood, men kneeling in fear, screams that tore through the night, images he could not fully grasp, but that carried weight enough to make him shiver. He had been gone. The bridge, the river. But now pieces of himself returned, unbidden and violent. She was there, as always, kneeling beside him. But when he looked at her, his eyes were different. Wider, sharper, alert. Fear and recognition mingled in the depths of his golden gaze. He could feel it now. The world outside had not stayed still. His enemies had not slept. His empire had not waited. A faint sound in the corridor drew him from the bed. The nurse noticed his sudden tension, the way his hands clenched, and instinctively she rose. They took her, he whispered, voice low, brittle. His words were meant for himself, yet she caught them, heart hammering. She didn't understand at first, but when she glanced outside the door, the long shadow in the hallway, the way footsteps didn't hesitate, she realized she had become the target. He swung from human vulnerability to predator in a heartbeat. Memories of the streets, the war, his enemies, all of it returned, unfiltered. He remembered who he was. Alpha Dragon Lord, Mafia King, the man they feared and obeyed, the man capable of destruction in a heartbeat. "She can't know," he muttered, almost to himself. The words carried weight, heavy with something he could not yet share. The truth of his power, the truth of his empire, the truth of what loving her might cost her. Yet despite the roar of danger clawing at him from the shadows, he moved. The world outside demanded action. The city, the men waiting in dark corners, the unseen threats pressing closer, they all needed him to remember. And he could not stay hidden any longer. She reached for his hand, voice trembling. "Wait, what's happening?" He shook his head slightly, gaze never leaving the corridor, every muscle taut and ready. "I have to go," he said, soft but unyielding. "But I will come back for you, always." Even as he spoke, he knew the weight of what he was about to do. Leaving her meant risk, danger she could not understand. Yet staying meant hiding, denying who he was. And that he could not do. The world outside the hospital was a different place than she had ever imagined. The calm she thought existed was an illusion. And now, she was caught in the current of something far greater than herself. The return of a king, a dragon, a force that had once ruled with fire and blood. As he stepped into the corridor, every step measured, every movement silent yet deliberate, she watched, heart lodged in her throat. The man who had learned to smile, to trust, to feel, was gone. Replaced by the shadow of the Alpha Dragon Mafia King she had unknowingly fallen for. And she knew, in that instant, that nothing would ever be the same again.
She never expected to see him like this. The room was quiet, yet charged with a tension that made the air tremble. Golden scales flickered faintly beneath his skin, hidden in shadows, catching the dim light as though fire lived just under the surface. His eyes glowed with something ancient, dangerous, and terrifying. He shifted, muscles coiled, and for the first time she saw him as he truly was, not the man she had nursed back to life, but the Alpha Dragon Mafia King who commanded fear and death in equal measure. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, but he didn't flinch, not at her touch, not at her presence. "I tried to stay away," he whispered, voice low, raw, trembling slightly. "I didn't want you to see me like this, the monster I am." Her heart ached. She saw the truth now, the monster he had been, the power he carried, the danger that shadowed him like a second skin. Yet beneath it, beneath the scales and fire, was the man she had come to love, the one who had trusted her, who had smiled at her, who had let himself be vulnerable. Gunfire echoed in the distance. Flames lit the night outside, casting jagged shadows against the walls. The city that had been quiet for a moment roared back to life, reminding them both that the world they existed in was ruthless and unforgiving. He rose, protecting her with every movement, positioning himself between her and danger she couldn't even see. The fear she felt was nothing compared to the weight he carried, the weight of memory, power, and enemies who would kill without hesitation. I won't let anything touch you," he said softly, though his voice was edged with fire. His hand, glowing faintly from the energy beneath his skin, hovered protectively over her shoulder. "I'll bear it all, every enemy, every threat, just to keep you safe." She pressed closer, tears running freely, heart hammering. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered. But he did. It was who he was. Alpha, king, dragon, protector, lover, monster, all at once. The shadows of the night pressed against the hospital walls, and yet inside, the quiet intimacy of that moment remained. He wasn't just a king, a dragon, a mafia lord. He was someone who loved her, who had chosen to fight for her despite the danger, despite himself. For the first time, she realized the truth of what she felt. Love wasn't only in smiles and soft hands. It was in the moments of terror, in the shared silence of fire and blood, in the knowledge that he would face the world and every monster in it to keep her safe. And he saw it too. Something softened behind the glowing eyes, a spark of humanity breaking through the layers of power, anger, and fear. For a brief, fleeting moment, the Alpha Dragon Mafia King looked small, vulnerable, human, and she loved him for it. The rain fell harder this time, pounding against the bridge like a relentless drum, masking the distant sirens and the quiet whisper of fear. The city below was a blur of lights and shadows, reflections dancing in the slick puddles underfoot. He stood at the edge, golden eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, heart heavy with memory and duty. He had returned to the bridge where it had all begun, the place where he had first fallen, lost everything, and been saved by her. And now he would face it all again, not as a man without memory, but as the Alpha Dragon Mafia King, a storm of power and vengeance wrapped around his every step. The wind tugged at his soaked coat, and he felt the weight of every choice pressing on him. He could feel her presence even before he saw her, a fragile light in the darkness, waiting, worried, unaware of what was coming. She had followed him, despite his warning, despite the danger. And that had been his mistake. Gunshots erupted from the shadows. Explosions shook the bridge, splintering wood and metal, sending shards of rain and debris into the air. Men he had once ruled, enemies he had once crushed, now hunted him and her relentlessly. The sound was deafening, yet somehow muted by the storm around him. He saw her stumble. An instinct took over. He moved faster than thought, wings flaring faintly, a glimmer of dragon light reflecting off the rain-soaked metal. He reached her, pressed her to his chest, shielding her from the worst of the fire. "Stay with me," she whispered, voice cracking, fingers clutching his coat. "I will," he murmured, but there was no certainty in his tone, only the knowledge that the bridge, the night, and the enemies closing in would demand a price. He took the final steps, heart hammering, lungs burning, knowing what he had to do. Golden light flared beneath his skin, scales shimmering faintly, wings spreading slightly as if the world itself could feel the force of his power. And yet, even as he turned toward the oncoming danger, his gaze lingered on her face, memorizing it, committing it to memory that could not be erased. The shots rang out, closer now, faster. He pushed her behind him, standing as the last line of defense, every movement precise, controlled, lethal. He struck with the skill of a lifetime, the fury of a king, the wrath of a dragon, but time was against him. A final explosion shook the bridge, rain mixed with blood, cold and unrelenting. He turned to her one last time, his golden eyes softening despite the chaos. "I did, didn't I?" he whispered, voice barely audible over the storm. She reached for him, but it was too late. He fell, slipping from the edge once more, this time not into the river as a survivor, but into silence. The world around her seemed to stop, rain blurring into tears, wind carrying away the sound of the city, leaving only the memory of him. She dropped to her knees, clutching the railing, heartbreaking, eyes fixed on the empty space where he had stood. He had saved her, protected her, loved her to the very end. And now he was gone. The city moved on. Buildings glimmered in the morning sun, cars hummed along the streets, and life went on as though the storm that had ripped through the bridge and claimed the Alpha Dragon Mafia King had never happened. But she did not move on, not truly. Her heart remained anchored to the man who had changed everything, the man who had loved her fiercely, sacrificed everything, and vanished like a shadow in the rain. Every year, without fail, she returned to the river where it had all begun, the place where he had fallen, where she had first laid her hands on him, trembling and scared, and where she had discovered the man who was at once a monster, a king, a dragon, and a lover. She knelt at the edge, letting her fingers brush the cold, flowing water, letting the current slip between her palms as though carrying fragments of memory, fragments of him. She could still see the golden eyes, glowing softly even in the dim light of that night. She could still feel the warmth of his hand, the tremor in his fingers when he had whispered, "Stay with me." She remembered the faint shimmer of his dragon scales beneath his skin, the quiet strength in his presence, the fragile human vulnerability hidden beneath the power and fear he carried everywhere he went. Tears ran freely now, mingling with the river's flow, every heartbeat a reminder of loss, every breath a whisper of what could have been. She imagined him there, wings folded, golden scales glinting faintly, his gaze tender yet fierce, a silent promise of protection and love that had transcended even death. He had been terrifying and gentle, powerful and broken, and she had loved every part of him. The wind stirred over the water, soft and insistent, carrying with it a single golden scale that floated to the surface, shimmering in the sunlight. She reached for it, fingers trembling, holding it like the most precious thing she had ever touched. It was a reminder that some love endures beyond time, beyond death, beyond the cruelty of a world that rarely gives happiness freely. She closed her eyes and whispered his name, voice trembling but unwavering. "You were never a monster to me." She thought of all the moments she had shared with him, every gentle smile, every trembling confession, every heartbeat that had tied them together in a fragile, sacred bond. And she realized that love is not measured in days or years, in life or death, but in moments of courage, in choices that define who we are, in the willingness to give everything for someone else. The city pulsed around her, oblivious to the life and death, to the battles fought and the wars that had shaped both of them. Yet she understood. She had loved him in ways words could never capture, in ways that would outlast time itself, outlast the silence of the bridge, the cold river, and the fading echoes of gunfire and fire. Rising slowly, she let the river flow past her fingers, a single golden scale held tightly in her palm. She whispered one final promise into the wind, carrying it to him wherever he might be. "I will love you forever." Even if he was gone, even if the city forgot, even if she walked alone for the rest of her days. Because some love, once found, never fades. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the rush of water, in the gentle sway of trees, in the heartbeat that remembers. Some love leaves scars, aching, invisible yet eternal. And in that knowledge she found peace, not happiness, not closure, but love, infinite and unbroken. And for a moment, as the wind danced across the water, a single golden scale floated upward, catching the light, a whisper of a promise kept, a love that had never died, and a memory that would never fade.